She walked into the courtroom with quiet grace, wearing simple heels and a conservative black dress. To Officer Bradley, she looked like a clerk, or maybe a janitor. "Ma'am, you can't be back here," he barked, stepping in front of her. But when she calmly showed her credentials, he smirked and snatched them from her hand. "You people are always pretending to be something you're not," he scoffed. The bailiff froze, the attorneys paused, whispers spread, because the woman he just shoved was no ordinary guest. She was Judge Naomi Sinclair, the youngest black woman ever appointed to the state's appellate bench. And in 5 minutes, she wasn't just going to make him regret it. She was going to make the whole system shake. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to Dark Side of Luna for more powerful stories where justice, identity, and truth collide. Real stories, real twists, and real power moves you'll never forget. The moment Naomi sat at the bench, the courtroom fell into stunned silence. Officer Bradley's jaw dropped. His hands, once full of authority, now trembled by his sides. I didn't know you were the judge," he stammered. "Naomi didn't even flinch, but you knew I was black, and that was enough for you." The courtroom gasped, but Naomi wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her voice steady and surgical. "You've been named in 4 prior misconduct complaints, 3 involving women of color." Bradley's face flushed red. "And today," she said, holding up the crumpled ID he'd torn from her hands, "today, you just proved them all right." Suddenly, a door in the back opened. A woman in a Navy suit entered with a file in hand. It was Tasha Moore, an internal affairs officer with the DOJ. "I believe we're ready to proceed with disciplinary hearings, Your Honor," she said, her voice cool. Officer Bradley looked like he'd been struck. But the biggest twist, Naomi wasn't just the judge for today's docket. She was also heading up a new judicial task force, one created to investigate systemic bias in law enforcement. And Officer Bradley, he was going to be case number 001. The murmurs in the courtroom hadn't even settled when Naomi tapped her gavel once more. "Bring in the next witness." The back doors opened again, and in walked Ava Bradley, the officer's own daughter. Gasps echoed off the marble walls. She didn't wear a police uniform. She wore a black suit and carried a folder marked "Testimony, Internal Use Only." Naomi nodded gently. "Thank you for being here, Ms. Bradley." Officer Bradley turned pale. "Ava, what are you doing?" But Ava didn't look at him. "I requested to testify in this hearing. I've seen what my father's done, and I can't stay silent anymore." The room held its breath. "I've watched him lie. I've heard the slurs. I found body cam footage he deleted, and I've turned it over to Internal Affairs." Officer Bradley's hands shook as his empire began to crumble, not just from the outside, but from within his own home. Naomi looked straight at him. "Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about the truth coming from the last person you expect." And just like that, this wasn't just a disciplinary hearing. It was a full-scale exposure, a reckoning. Ava stepped down from the witness stand and walked past her father without so much as a glance. The silence in the courtroom was deafening until Naomi stood up from the bench. "Before this session ends, there's one more detail that must be entered into the record." She pulled out a sealed envelope and handed it to the bailiff. "This file," she said, "contains a whistleblower report filed anonymously 3 weeks ago. It outlines a systemic pattern of abuse, cover-ups, and falsified reports spanning the past 12 years. She turned her eyes toward Officer Bradley. "And do you know who the original source of this information was?" Bradley's voice cracked. "Who?" Naomi's eyes locked with his. "Your wife." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Bradley staggered back like he'd been hit. "That's not possible. She wouldn't." Naomi's voice was cold steel. "She did. And she did it to protect your daughter before she fled." Suddenly, the courtroom doors opened again. A woman entered, poised, strong, and unmistakably familiar. Naomi smiled warmly. "Welcome back, Detective Elise Bradley." Ava's mother. The courtroom exploded. The case had become a national flashpoint overnight, but no one expected this level of betrayal and bravery from inside the cop's own family. This wasn't just a takedown, it was a generational revolution against abuse and silence. Elise stood in the middle of the courtroom, eyes locked on Officer Bradley, who now looked like a man watching his entire world collapse in slow motion. His usual smug expression had disappeared, replaced by disbelief and dread. Naomi, steady behind the bench, watched as Elise reached into her coat and handed a thick envelope to the federal agents who had just entered. The room fell so quiet you could hear the rustle of papers as one of the agents flipped through them. Inside were damning documents, internal memos, falsified reports, body cam footage that had malfunctioned until Elise recovered the backup copies. Every thread Officer Bradley had tried to cut had now been stitched into a noose. Ava, shaking in the witness stand, whispered through tears, "You kept everything." Elise turned to her daughter, voice calm but fierce. "I never stopped fighting for you. I just had to make sure we were safe first." The courtroom erupted again as the lead agent addressed the room. "Due to the overwhelming evidence provided by Detective Elise Bradley, we've launched a full investigation into misconduct, racial bias, and corruption within the Metro Division. Arrests are already underway as we speak." Bradley tried to protest, but two federal officers stepped forward and placed him in handcuffs, reading him his rights. He stammered, "You can't do this, I own this place." Naomi stood up, her robe flowing with quiet power. "No, Officer Bradley, the days of people like you thinking they own the system are over. We're rebuilding it brick by brick, with people like her." She gestured toward Elise, who stood tall, flanked by agents and now, journalists flooding in from the hallway. Cameras clicked. Flashes lit the room. The lead agent spoke again. "Detective Bradley, you are hereby reinstated, and we're offering you the position of director in our newly formed Civil Integrity Task Force. Your work, both in silence and now in courage, will change the way this city polices itself." The entire room stood and applauded. Ava ran from the stand and threw her arms around her mother, sobbing with pride and joy. Naomi descended from the bench and embraced both of them. "You didn't just survive, you transformed." And outside, crowds were gathering, holding signs not of protest but of praise. "Justice for Ava, Detective Elise, a hero returns. Reform begins today." The media would cover it. The nation would watch it. And somewhere in the hearts of people who had almost given up on change, hope lit up again. Because this wasn't just a courtroom victory. It was a rebirth. A new era led by black women who refused to be silenced, underestimated, or erased. If this story gave you chills, inspired you, or reminded you that real change is possible, don't scroll past. Subscribe to Dark Side of Luna right now. These stories matter. These voices deserve to be heard. Let's amplify them together.